Hi, this is Ed, and today is August 12, I think. And let's see, what day is it today? No, it's August 10, Thursday. We're awaiting the arrival of our special guest, Mr. Reiner Lomb. He's the author of a best-selling book called Aspire, and he is a executive coach, preeminent, top tier, the boomerang coach. So let's welcome Reiner. Hello, Reiner. Welcome.
Hello, Ed. It's good to see you again.
Nice to see you. Do you like my new
Thank you.
background here? They've got the name.
I love it. Global TV. It's so impressive.
So I'm out in outer space in San Diego here. So now we are recording live right now. I was just doing a really quick intro to the show and testing the mic at the same time. So welcome. So I was just on your site a few minutes ago. It's a beautiful site, reinerlomb.com. That's REINERLOMB.com. So boomerang coaching is the umbrella of your executive coaching and leadership development. Is that it?
Yeah, Boomerang Coach. I started in around 2007, 2008. And this was for me my jumpstart business, leaving the corporate world where I was an entrepreneur starting software businesses. And I wanted to go into developing leaders, developing people. I had done already, I worked at HP starting software businesses within HP. I had helped to start HP software business over 24 years period from zero to $4 billion business. So I was part of a team. And the last years, I actually had many leadership roles, but in mostly global leadership roles. I enjoyed most not the development of the software, but the development of the people, and so that got me. So my passion got me into leadership development. I did at HP as a side project beside my management roles. I did develop leaders with other colleagues of mine. And I had so much fun with doing it, but also it's linked closely to my purpose. I want to create a more positive future for all, and I need to emphasize all people. And I chose to do that by focusing on mobilizing people to become leaders, change agents. You don't necessarily have to be a formal leader. You don't have to be in a management role to create positive change around you. And it's more a question about can you create change or not? It's how much change do you want to create? And
let me ask you a question, if I may, on that. So let's go back to HP, first in Germany. So you obviously had a lot of reports and you had a big C-suite, but the title of your book, Aspire, is about understanding and managing emotions to help you become more resilient and just a better leader, a better person, perhaps. Can we take a sidestep and go into the emotions that you're referring to, specific emotions?
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe I set a little bit the context, the premise of Aspire, of this book, which is my second book around change and leadership and so on. I had learned many different leadership models. I had great teachers. I had always, with HP, I had access to great mentors and leaders that helped me develop my leadership skills. But all these models were focused on behaviors, which is not wrong. There's nothing wrong with it. But and sometimes it focused on some drivers of the behaviors, like the thinking, what thoughts we have and stories we create, but also on values and so on. But it left out the emotion as a very important driver of behaviors. and I think the reason why that happened, because they're very invisible to us, and also in our whole system and growing up, like the educational system and then the corporate system, we didn't used to talk about emotions. It was a touchy-feely thing, and it was even sometimes perceived, being emotional was perceived negative. So I discovered that in my roles in influencing people, sometimes so I had people that were reporting to me. I had direct influence through my management and coaching them, but I had also a lot of people I had to influence worldwide at a global base. They did not report to me, so I had to influence them in a different way, through not through power. I'm saying that a different kind of power, and that's where I learned the power of emotions. The first books that came out of emotional intelligence was in the mid-90s. And I read them, I ate them up, and I mean, I studied all the great leadership and behavioral experts and so on, and some were also my mentors, like Robert Quinn from Michigan University, for example. He was a great teacher and mentor of mine, and when it comes to leadership development, and Ken Blanchard and others. But I studied them, and I always applied what I learned. Now, for me, a breakthrough was really when I learned more about emotions. So I had also mentors that had not written books about it, but that had studied emotions. And when they opened a whole new world for me, and I became much more effective in influencing people. And the reason is, again, emotions drive our behavior much stronger than we believe. There's no action we take, no decisions we make that's not affected by our emotions. But the tricky thing is that it's not visible to us. Most of us are not aware, but we are always in a mix of emotions at any given time. So back to the book, and the premise of the book is the kind of thing. So anyone can be a leader. That's the first premise. Anybody can create change, and creating change or leading change requires to influence behavior of others, starting with your own behavior. So you start with a change vision, something you want to change, so maybe you're dissatisfied with the status quo, and say, who do I need to influence, and what behavior do they need to show in order to make that vision a reality?
So
now,
when I was a kid, growing up, emotions were something that, grow up, you're a guy, take care of this, get things done. And I'm sure you had the same
yes,
growing up experience. And so conquering that comes from understanding that it's normal. There's
yeah,
nothing wrong,
yeah.
to feel bad. Or how do you feel bad? What does feeling bad mean? So, tell us about that emotion, about, do you feel for somebody who doesn't have your capabilities? How do you,
Yeah,
without lecturing,
yeah.
how do
And
you
this is where,
control yourself, and then apply your sensitivity to another person's situation, or a lack of demonstrated view from an emotional understanding point of view? I think I'm getting lost in my words here.
no, I think you are right on. Right on. This is what you are asking is one of the most crucial questions, right? When we interact with people, we see the behavior, and the behavior makes us approve or disapprove of the other person. If we see something in cross-cultural interaction that happens very often, we see something we're not familiar with that maybe in our culture is not perceived as positive. Maybe somebody shows up 5 minutes late. In that culture, it's totally okay. It's not late, but in my culture, it's being
It's
on time
rude.
is late, right?
It's
Kind
rude.
of thing.
Yeah,
Just
right.
giving an example, right? So we watch the behavior. So the question is always kind of, what is really underneath that behavior? What does this person think, believe? What does this person feel? And this, I think you're hitting on something where, when we know how the other person thinks, what they think, what they feel, what drives their behavior, including their emotions, and we're always in a range of emotions, that we call empathy, right? And that empathy is a great bridge builder. Empathy alone does not allow us yet to move to action, to serve somebody's needs, but it helps us to feel what another person is feeling. When we talk about emotional empathy, when we talk about more cognitive empathy, we know what the other person is thinking. or why they behave a certain way. So we have different types of empathy, but empathy is for me the foundation of the Aspire leadership model. That's why I put this in Aspire at the foundation of the pyramid. You have to start with empathy, but empathy is not enough. You need to, in order to move to action, you need to have compassion. Again, compassion not as a virtue, compassion as an emotion, as a feeling.
And explaining it while you're giving orders on how to get something done, understanding how people can possibly feel about something that is foreign to some people, but not foreign to others.
Yeah, I think the point is emotions can be a driver of a desired behavior, but they can also be a barrier of a desired behavior, right? So for example, if I want to mobilize people and they feel inspired by my vision, they're going to act towards that vision. I don't need to tell them a lot. They might come back to me and say, which direction do you want us to go now? If the vision is not clear enough, but let's say they feel inspired. Now, if they feel afraid of that vision, that's too big. That's for us too big, or that's too dangerous to pursue that. I wrote in the book the example of the peaceful revolution that did lead to the fall of the wall, where originally fear was keeping people back. Fear and also not being optimistic keep people back. That's where those emotions were a barrier to the desired behavior. And then when they shifted their emotion more to optimism and courage, then they went to the streets in masses and created this peaceful revolution that brought down the Berlin Wall. And then, you know, everything else is history now. So that's an example. The same, what I'm describing here in this example, applies to everyday leadership in your family, if you want to influence your children or your better half, your partner or friends, or in a corporation, or in in society, in the community. The same mechanism applies. And I want to say something that really hits me every time I think about it. We have these, you know, when you write a book, so this book I wrote for 7 years, but before that I developed the leadership model for about 10 to 20 years, and I practiced it and so on. So it's a long time. So I always love to develop something that's useful for people, that's not changing no matter what is changing in the world, right? Because some books are written, you read them this year, next year they're obsolete because the world has changed. Let's say in the old way of doing business, when e-commerce came, suddenly every advice around the old way of selling was obsolete, like door-to-door selling and things like that, right? But when people were trained, so you had to learn new skills. Now, when it comes to emotions, that we developed through evolution, emotions made us survive, that we're still here, that we're eaten up by the tigers and by more powerful predators, right? That was emotions that made us survive and thrive on this planet. We need to be aware of that. So when you learn emotions today, when I teach them this, you learn something for life and you pass it on to other generations. My mother passed emotional competencies on to me. She did not consciously do that. She just because she was more emotionally attuned. I learned a lot, not understanding fully what's happening, but I learned a lot about emotional competence and intelligence from my mother when I grew up as a child, because it was a talent she had.
So she explained, not just given a directive, but explaining why, and where it goes.
Very simple. Like when I showed a certain behavior as a child, and she felt that could be hurtful for another person, she explained to me, put yourself into the shoes of this person, this other child, and resonate with the feelings. And how would you feel in this moment? So this from little on helped me to develop empathy, but also she had a great feeling of compassion. She was a very servant-driven leader, like my father too. I watched role models, even without understanding about emotions. I could see them in action, and later I could decipher what happened there. So I had a little bit of foundation.
So these are building. So what you're saying, what I'm hearing and interpreting it, blah, 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 is the engineering of total understanding must include feelings and understanding and, I don't know, compassion.
Yeah, and compassion is one of the 7 essential emotions for leading positive change that I discovered over, I'm not the only one that discovered them, but I'm stepping on big shoulders, right? That have,
Yeah.
I'm a practitioner.
But what I like what you're doing and what you're explaining, I get it. Hopefully I'm getting it the right way, is that it's an engineering approach to dealing with something that has not been given that approach.
Yes, it is. Basically, I analyzed the behaviors and I looked into the drivers. I looked into the research, the academic research of great people. There's a lot of, and there's actually, as we speak, there's constantly research and emotions going on. So yeah, I took I'm a computer scientist by training. I'm master's in computer science. I'm also, have an MBA and so on. So I have a very scientific approach to things, or analytical approach to things, and understanding and developing new models and applying them to me before I even write about it. So I use a new concept that I discover, a new insight, in coaching leaders or in my teachings or in other practical settings before I even suggest them to anybody else, so that this could be helpful.
So let's go back to the days of software, being an entrepreneur within a large structure. And obviously you had command of resources, to not just like me trying to start a TV talk show with no money, but I had ideas on how to do it.
Yeah.
So you had ideas and you also had resources. Of course, you had to get other guys to support. Maybe, and so going back to those days with software. Now, software was an engineering. I'm using my own words. Software was, when applied to the machines, is almost the emotions of the machines because it makes it work, right?
It's a good way to see it. The invisible things that make the computers behave the way you want it, right? Yeah, it is true. So you can compare it. But let me add one thing. When you and this applied to me as well. So I was part of a startup team, of a task force, to investigate and make a proposal for starting a software business within a hardware company, Hewlett Packard. And that was in Germany, where I was hired. I was relatively new, but this was already my second career. I had already a successful technology career focused more on hardware. I went back to school to get my studied computer science. And I was convinced that the future is software in order to make computers more intelligent. And there would be a revolution. And I studied, a little bit the future and the technology development and so on. And I was also from several years, part of a research lab that was pretty close related to what we call today AI, like, artificial intelligence and so on. But so I knew the power. I knew what was possible, but it was not easy to communicate. And when I joined HP, I did not have a management role. I was basically a computer engineer. I was hired into marketing. I switched from the engineering side to the marketing side, but more from the marketing planning to the plan new products and envision new products. So I had no resources myself at that time. So the beauty of they're comparing to an entrepreneur, somebody that starts businesses outside of in the market. Intrapreneur is the same thing, just in a large company. That's why I called myself an entrepreneur. A great teacher of mine, Gifford Pinchot, coined that term many years ago. And most entrepreneurs don't have resources. They need to convince people. They need to ask, they need to fight for resources. They need to inspire and mobilize people. So many things I write about in the book came from that experience, how to influence and mobilize in all directions. And I have an example in the book itself. In the early phase of the software business, I had with my team, with my colleagues, my boss, and the engineering team had been given a certain number of resources. I think it was about 10 to 20 in that range. I don't know exactly some number, to develop a new software product that I had planned for about 2 years. I knew the market in and out, and I knew this product would be successful. I had identified the highest priorities in that market. And so I was so convinced about it. But then came our general manager came, said, sorry, Reiner, and to my boss, he said, we need to take the resources away. We need it for another strategic project that's even more important than yours. And I was devastated in this moment. And so before the meeting ended, was just about to get up. I said, can I have a couple more minutes before we end this meeting? Because I knew if this meeting ended, it was done. So I asked him, what if I come up with another idea to develop this product without our own resources? And he said, that's a great idea. How are we going to do that? I said, I'm going to look for a partner, for like outside, for development partner. And at that time, this was shortly after the fall of the wall, and they were like in Eastern Europe, this was in Slovenia, there were a lot of hungry young software companies that wanted to partner with large corporations. And I found one of those companies that was willing to invest, to co-invest. So we provided the plan, the vision for the product. I had specified it exactly. They provided the engineering resources, and we would share the profit. And that was
Yeah,
for them.
brilliant. Well, that's the beginning of the partnerships.
Yeah, and that just this product that from basically this was planned from ground up between my colleagues and I. When I left HP, it was a $200 million business. Just within the $4 billion business, there was a highly profitable software business with this model.
Great.
It still exists today after over 30 years. I still see it in the market and so on, which is unbelievable. But I just wanted to give an example of it's not always the resources. The ones that get the most resources are the most successful one. Later, when you build on your success, I got resources, I got the management titles, the leadership roles, and so on, because I had built trust that I could, I could lead things successfully and start things from ground up and could grow them globally. But it was not initially there. So every listener out there, what I highly would recommend, don't think that you have to have the money and resources to do something. I mean, with this launching this book and my first book also, I don't have huge amount of resources like some, publishers have, or like somebody that has a brand already, right? A brand name in a certain area can sell off 1 million books. I have to bootstrap. So I'm using the bootstrapping approach, and I'm thinking about who do I target next. So I'm constantly expand my circle of reach with this product, as I have done it with my software products. Step by step, year by year.
The engineering approach.
Yeah, and also
building blocks.
To say what is the next and what is the next strategy, what's the next step, what resources do I need, and that way you can build businesses that way. Sure, it's nice to have an investor, right? If you have that and you have huge money and resources, but it's not always that those lead to success. I just wanted to point that out. You can create something even if you have little resources.
So this is really instructive, because what I've been doing since the pandemic stopped my live conference business is bringing people into the Zoom room, the global meeting room, as I call it, from across time and space, from across silos, from across industries, from across borders and cultures. And I've given it away free so that I could build an audience and build relationships anew from scratch. And this feeling thing of trying to understand people who are different and giving them a microphone to talk about who they are and what they're doing and what their brand's supposed to be doing, whether they're a book writer or a candlestick maker, it's caught on. And now it's ubiquitous everywhere. I'm not the only one doing this. So having you talk about the engineering approach from an engineer, and so, an engineering scientist, is like, it's like fuel for my energy to think, get into that structural thinking and building blocks and how to make it work and explain it somehow to people in a repetitive way without becoming a meat
Yeah.
grinder, that's where the empathy and the emotions and understanding that people will think, oh, shut up, rather than,
Well,
oh, tell me more. Yeah.
yeah. Well, Ed, you're raising a wonderful point. I mean, you basically started a new business from scratch.
Yeah.
You came up with a model, and now you have been expanding it. And then I followed you in the last year. We talked, I think it was about a year ago, and it was a great pleasure. I love
Yeah.
seeing people
Thank you.
starting new ideas. And I think your idea was built on a change that happened in the environment, the pandemic, but in general, the move to more online, like podcasting and reaching audience that way. For example, my first book launch I did totally different than the second one. The first one was really focused more on one-on-one and on face-to-face and not so much virtual, also some social media. But the second one was focused really on a podcast tour around the world, Australia, Canada, English speaking, even Germany and Ireland and those places, but the US
Without
obviously.
the money expended in travel.
Right, exactly. It saved the
Right.
money, and it was I could do volume. In terms of I could do many of those, and each was unique and different. But the beauty of that was also you're recording right now, not just this live event, but this in the moment of the recording, the people that can attend that, you can multiply it. You can actually cut and reuse. I had one of my
Right.
webinars that I did very educational. I had cut in little pieces, like little video clips, each of them educational, that can be digested by somebody that has little time. Like like questions you asked me about the 7 emotions, so I would break it down and explain each of these emotions and the behavior it drives and how you can learn them. Right, so it has a value for somebody that might pick it up in that moment. They don't have to read the whole book. They can if they want. I would love them to do,
Yeah.
because you have the whole concept. But I give a lot of these things for free. And what you do basically, you don't have a shelf life, like end of shelf life, right? Like the old days where you say this product is not selling, you take it off the shelf. With a book, with a video like this, it has an endless shelf life,
Yeah.
basically.
Let me ask you about a couple of emotions, if they are emotions. I don't know. How about fear?
Hmm?
All right. Now
Fears.
let's break it down more, if I may. Fear of not being viewed as smart, maybe
Uh-huh.
fear of being viewed as dumb, like
Mm-hmm.
because I don't
Mm-hmm.
get something or I just can't put the
Yeah,
pieces together yet.
yeah, yeah. Fear is a fierce one. Obviously, fear has evolved, has helped us to survive a dangerous situation, right? To feel fear before we can even think so quickly. Basically, basically the way how now the latest in research and emotions, it's not automatic. It's basically we have sensory input all the time for many different senses, right? Hearing, seeing, feeling, and so on. And that triggers emotions. Okay, so when we're in a safe environment, we feel safe, we feel peaceful, serenity, and things like that. Wonderful feeling. But if, let's say, we pick something up that we perceive as dangerous, we have fear, or we develop anxiety if we don't know exactly what the risk is, and so on. So we all have it, but that came through evolution that made us survive. So fear is a good emotion. However, in the modern world, and so what you describe is, so let's say in the old day, the fear came from an external threat, let's say an animal, like many use the example of the tiger, right? Or the saber-toothed tiger and so on. Or it could be like in the tribal communities, hunter and gatherer. It could be, let's say, somebody that is coming into our space from outside, right?
Right.
Humans or animals or whatever. But the point is that while fear is a useful emotion and we don't want to get rid of it, because then we could not protect ourselves in the moment of danger, fear can also be if the fear is triggered by something we perceive as dangerous, but it's not dangerous. So for example, your belief to saying, if I say this now, it sounds dumb, so I better don't say it out of fear. That prevents you from taking risk and from being out there and developing new ideas. I can relate to that, because in terms of publishing, and I've written many articles and so on, every time I put myself out there, even with a post, with just a single social media post, or on this call here, I need to make sure that I'm really open and authentic and not held back by fear, because otherwise this would not be a very creative conversation.
Yeah, I get
keeps
it.
us keeps us, so fear keeps, in this moment, what you describe, fear of sounding stupid, keeps us from learning, and keeps us from taking risk, and keeps us from creating something new, and learning is always risky.
So what about the emotion called, I'm sorry, empathy? In other words, understanding something from another view.
Okay, so I would say there's empathy and there's interest. Okay, and there's curiosity.
That's interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good breakdown.
Interest,
Wow.
interest as an emotion.
It's like stages. Yeah.
Yeah, and in the Aspire leadership model, I have empathy, compassion, and interest as the foundation. Empathy, and I mean emotional empathy, you resonate with the feeling of another person, meaning if you feel fear, I feel your fear. Okay, so I know Ed is feeling fear, and if I want to help you to overcome this fear, I tune into this. I ask, what are you afraid of? Can I help you to get over this, right? With a child, we try to do this. With adults, we also should do this if we have good intentions, right? Now, if somebody has bad intentions, they might use the fear of people to manipulate them. But so on top of empathy and compassion, and compassion, again, is the commitment to serve the needs. If I need to have fear and you have the need to overcome the fear, compassion makes me commit to serving and helping you over that fear. Okay. Now, the next one is interest, and interest is the emotion that provides sustained energy for us to try to understand something deeply and holistically. That's what makes us ask questions. That makes us curious. Curious is another emotion that's a little bit more short-lived. That's why I prefer interest for understanding. Let's say, so any leader, but any person in learning should have interest. If you don't have interest, you're not going to learn, right? We have seen that. We see, let's say we look at an abstract painting and we don't get it and we walk away, we lose interest. We look at an abstract painting, but there is some piece that sounds familiar, saying, oh, I could identify, this means something bigger that we care about. And we get interested, we might ask questions to curator of that piece of art, or the artist over herself. Right?
So the word values, it's kind of amorphous, like, I'm blindfolded and touching the elephant or something, what are your values? I don't even know how to get my arms around it. What do you mean? So
that's wonderful.
Help me with that.
Yeah. So let me put a little bit in a larger context. Now it becomes a little bit academic, but this is based on all the research of behavioral. We're talking about behavioral science, right? What drives behavior? What drives our decisions? What drives our action? And so there's some models that suggest there's the human needs, the unmet needs we have, but also the aspirational needs. So this goes back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs and the evolution of those, right? So I worked, let's say, last week I worked with a tribal community in Colorado, and we did several days of planning to identify what their needs are as a community, as a tribe, and how to meet those needs, to come up with solutions, like, in the educational space to build a native school, in the food system to build a healthy food store, in the healthcare, mental health care, to build a healthcare facility that they can visit 24/7, for just giving you examples, and then on water, roads, and things like that. But there's also, when it comes to needs, there's the aspirational needs. These are the higher needs that provide a sustained commitment for us. Let's say my need, higher aspirational need, is to create a positive future for all. I have children, I have grandchildren. I deeply care about the people in the world. I have friends all over the world. I have family in Germany and Brazil. My wife is from Brazil. So I'm very connected. So I care what's going on in the world. And so my higher aspirational needs is to leave a better world, if as much as I can, to have a positive influence. That's why the work I'm doing. So that's driven by the needs. The values are then they are driven by the needs we have. Right?
So that
So
it means it's like a do-good thing, or be helpful to someone.
Yeah, that's so I'm saying that, yeah, so the values we hold are we learn from our culture we grow up in. So when, let's say, in the culture I grew up, like I grew up in a small village in Germany, 200 people, a Catholic village. My parents were Catholic in a positive way. Like not all the sins of the church we know from the past, but taking the good teachings in being of service, helping others, compassion, all these good things. So they turned then in values for my life. We had a family business. The way we treated our clients with respect was a value in serving their needs. So that really, let's say my father was a cabinet maker, and when he did a project and the client came back and said something is wrong with it, he went right there and fixed it. Okay. Even after he had taken the money, that was part of their value system. There's a small family business where everybody knows you and you take care of each other. The employees he had, when they got sick, he went to the hospital and visit them every other day to make sure they were okay, and took care of their families as well. So this is part of the value system that drives our behavior. So the needs affect our behavior, and so the need for living in a healthy community drives our values to take care of that community, of our neighbors, right? That's a value.
So
We take
it's a
care.
driver, like a
Yeah,
driver.
if the neighbor, if the neighbor gets sick, we put our work down and we go over and say, what do you need? Okay. Can I help you? Or the neighbor dies and we help prepare the funeral. Or we had this tradition that the neighbors around that neighbor, when somebody died, they were carrying the casket to the funeral. That was like, so I saw every time. So this is more in the value space, right? And it drives our behaviors as well, but it is more a learned. These values are learned and they are very stable. You take them everywhere you go. So when I went into the large corporate world, I took the values from my small family business with me, and I was acting towards my clients, even if they were large corporations, the same way my grandfather was behaving towards his clients. These were values, right?
Well,
Now
that's an excellent discussion, and I totally understand it a lot better now because of the engineering approach to breaking it down and describe exactly how you did it, about family, working together, community, small town, helping people just by offering to help is just as good as helping.
Yes. And again, the values can be, I talked about time, right? In terms of the value of what, like, so Germans, on time is very important. It is it is an expression of respect. Or let's say going to a wedding, you invited, you dress nicely to show respect to the couple that's getting married, right? Or you invited to a birthday and you bring flowers, right, to show the appreciation or celebrate. So there's many things that show up in our behavior that come from our values that we have, our parents or grandparents or our environment has role model. Now companies have also cultures, right? So the cultures are made up of these invisible things. It's the behaviors and the values that drive those behaviors, right? So companies very often, they on their website even, they would say these are our values. They describe how we should treat our colleagues, our employees, how we should communicate with each other. We had a training at HP once a year in terms of ethics, how we serve our clients, that we don't take bribes or anything, or we don't bribe anybody, or we don't, or how we respect diversity, right? From anything from ethnicity and country and sex and religion and everything. So we had trainings on, but it's a learned culture and we teach our children. Our children learn the family culture, right? The values of the family, and they take it into the world, and then they mix it with other cultures over time. They choose school, they go to, to universities or just as an apprenticeship, or companies they go to.
Reiner Lomb, I've really enjoyed this inspiring conversation, and I get it. So I see your Aspire book behind you on the bookcase. So Aspire, tell me how you use that name for that book.
Yeah, Aspire itself is also an emotion. It is when you strive for something higher. So for me, it is associated with achieving something bigger, something higher, something that goes beyond myself in a way. I aspire to mobilize as many leaders as possible to create a positive future, no matter where they want to make a difference or how big the difference they want to make. I aspire towards that. And so I didn't include it into the 7 emotions, but I put it as a title because it assumes, for me, it assumes that a leader, somebody that wants to create positive change, aspires to create change, has that energy to create a positive change. So that's why I used it as the title.
So you strive to help people thrive.
Thrive, yeah, it could be an aspiration. I could have also other aspirations. I could have the aspiration of saving the world from climate change. I could have the aspiration of creating world peace. Now, this sounds very big goals, but if I take it down to my community or my family, I can say, okay, so let's start with my family to have peace, or with my neighborhood, or with my town, not to have so many homicides, or have peace within ourselves. So what I'm saying, every big aspiration you have, you can start at a smaller level, and you can make an immediate difference starting with yourself.
Thank you, Reiner Lomb, for being on Global TV. Please come back again.
Thank you. It was an honor to be here, and a joy too, Ed.
Yeah, I think I've learned a lot from you today, and just like the last time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.